I'm Bailey Dickey and I lead networks here at GGV. I'm really excited to welcome everyone to our 6th annual Evolving Enterprise. This year, we're hosting a series of 7 masterclasses on top of mind topics for CEOs and functional leaders. This is the 2nd of 7. If you missed the first, it'll be posted on our YouTube channel. That one's on building and running product teams. But this series will run every Wednesday from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific through April 13th. If you haven't already, you can view upcoming masterclasses and RSVP via the link I'll drop in the chat. And we really want to thank Silicon Valley Bank for their continued partnership on Evolving Enterprise and for helping make this series happen. That's enough from me. I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany Luck from here at GGV to introduce today's session.
Awesome. Thanks, Bailey. And hi, everyone. Good to see you all. See some familiar faces. Super excited about today's topic. You know, as Bailey mentioned, we're doing topics on things that are top of mind for people, and certainly building teams, especially in today's environment, I think is something that comes up constantly in every conversation, and especially in an ever-changing world. So very, very excited today to have Ruby Hoose, who's the head of people and talent at Tonic, and Adam Ward, who's a partner at Growth by Design Talent, to chat about how they're thinking through recruiting and a bunch of other topics. I think we got over 100 questions submitted for today's session, so we'll try to cover as much as possible. And if you do have questions, you know, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll try to cover those as well during the topics. So maybe to kick us off, I'll actually just ask Ruby and Adam to give us a quick intro about themselves. And we'll start with you, Ruby.
Awesome. Well, hey, everyone, I'm Ruby, and I lead people and talent at Tonic, which is a data synthesis startup within GGV's portfolio. My background is mainly in in-house recruitment, both as an individual contributor and a functional leader. And I'm excited to talk with Tiffany and Adam and all of you today about building world-class teams.
All right, over to you, Adam.
Hey everyone, Adam Ward here. Thanks for carving out time of your very busy days and schedules to join us for this series. I am a founding partner in Growth by Design Talent. We're broadly a talent advisory firm that works with early and growth stage startups on consulting, some search and training. Prior to Growth by Design, I ran recruiting at Pinterest for most of my 5 years there. I was one of the early recruiting leaders at Facebook back in the day. Yeah, we're close partners with GGV, and so excited to be here to talk with all of you.
Awesome. Okay, well, one thing, you know, I think we always talk about, you know, kind of building a world-class team in a, quote, increasingly competitive environment. And I think that environment is changing every day, both in terms of how quickly things are happening, you know, the way that we interact with people, and obviously everyone's trying to hire top talent. Maybe just to start us off, kind of what do you think is the state of the market? And I think it'd be great, Adam, you can talk maybe what you're seeing across companies. You know, obviously you're working with multiple, and then we can hear from Ruby about how she's thinking about it and what she sees specifically for Tonic.
Yeah, I mean, you're all probably at the front of it as well. But if you look at the amount of capital that's been raised over the last 12 months, and it's almost $1 trillion of capital raised, you know, there's a large pressure on companies to deploy that capital, and the easiest and, you know, fastest way to deploy it is by hiring. So immense pressure on building out teams pretty quickly, and so that combined with you know, remote and, you know, location being removed as an obstacle, along with people through COVID coming up with maybe a new value set of what they want to do and where they want to spend their time, you just see a lot of activity. And so I think in tech, we see that it's a talent migration happening, but a lot of activity. And for, you know, companies that are growing or people that are doing recruiting, every move is a transaction that takes effort. So even if you're not growing your company, but if someone leaves, like that's still a role you've got to fill. So there's just a lot of activity and a lot of movement happening. And every time someone leaves one company, creates 2 moves: the company that has to replace them and the person that like recruits that person over. So we just see a lot of talent moving across companies, and a lot of pressure on companies to attract, engage and attract talent to their company. So just it's really busy, and I'm sure you're all feeling that as well.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
sure you're
just
saying, go ahead, Ruby. Yeah.
I was just going to say, chiming in from a company perspective, to Adam's point, the market is moving very quickly. There's more demand for candidates than supply to meet that demand. And one thing that we're seeing is more than ever, candidates are moving really, really quickly. So, you start interviewing someone 1 week, you think you have a couple of weeks to get them through the process and close them, and they have 3 offers on the table by the next Monday. So it's hard. We're focusing on strong candidate experience, speed, and also quality of who we're hiring, and trying our best. I'm excited to dive more into that.
Yes. Okay, good. Let's start there actually, because I think that is probably one of the recurring questions we got is how do you think about speed, obviously while still optimizing and keeping a very high bar on quality. And I think we've heard that a lot. Everyone's moving very, very fast, and there is just so much movement given the number, kind of the velocity and the volume across multiple companies. So Ruby, how do you guys think about optimizing the candidate experience, interview process, any like tactical advice that you would give on how to balance both speed and quality?
Yeah, I'd say a few things. So one thing tactically that we did recently was look at a lot of our interview processes that were spread out. So for example, we'd have a phone screen with a recruiter, phone screen with the hiring manager, a technical interview, another one, and then we get to offer, and try to bulk together those steps as much as we could. That takes more work on our end, but it speeds up the process for candidates so that we can still evaluate them in a high quality way, but also get to an offer sooner. We've also focused on really trying to build strong processes and getting clear on what's important to us before diving in, making sure that, if the first candidate we see is a strong one, that we feel confident in hiring them, even without comparisons. And then the last thing I'll mention is really selling along the way with candidates. So even if that involves a founder going on as a first step to do a product demo or talk with a candidate about why they founded the company, we're trying to carve out space for that and time for that in our team to really get into sell mode with candidates pretty early on in the process.
Okay, I love that. Adam, want to hear yours. If you also have any, I think one thing that we got to dive in on there is just, you mentioned, it is okay possibly to pick the first person you interview if they're the right fit, right?
Yeah.
If you're really clear on that. Although it, I think people sometimes it gives people pause to just say like, do we need to evaluate more? But obviously things are moving quickly. Anything else you could say about that? And then Adam, we can get your thoughts on that too.
Yeah, I would say it's hard at startups, and I think it's probably the case for a lot of people here. Oftentimes when we're hiring a role, it's the first time we've hired for that role at Tonic. So it can be intimidating to hire the first person you see because you just don't know what else is out there. We are doing that, for example, right now we're hiring a technical writer for the first time. And what we did in that process was really tap our network for folks who are technical writers, that strong experience there, who may not work directly for Tonic, but who we could bring in as kind of advisors on this interview process to help get a sense of what a strong technical writer looks like, so that if we do find that person after the first few conversations, that we feel comfortable pulling the trigger on it.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah, and I mean, really just to add to that, you want to be comparing candidates to an objective success profile, not to one another. So if you're comparing candidates to one another and you're only talking to one person, of course, you're not going to feel confident in making that decision. But when you're comparing a candidate to like your kind of objective profile that you set out before talking to candidates, that might give you better confidence that that's the right person for you. But there's a couple common pitfalls we see on companies that give away one of your greatest advantages right now is speed. You might be trying to recruit from larger companies, and companies that are slow, small companies that make slow decisions or have a slow process are giving away one of the few advantages you have against the slower moving larger companies. So don't do that.
Yeah.
A couple of mistakes that can slow you down is when you think about that success profile, what matters most to the role. It's shocking to see how many companies actually don't screen for those things till the very end with like the founder. The thing that matters most gets screened at by the founder in like a culture, a fit for company interview or these other things. Pull forward the most important things to the front So, and then cascade accordingly behind it. So you have like these knockout questions up front versus waiting till the very end to realize that this isn't the person for you. That happens quite a bit. The second is like where you use your most valuable team members, your hiring manager or founders or investors, use them at the poles of the process. Use them to activate candidates that are passive, really strong ones, and to close. Where we often see fatigue happen for companies in high growth is that you're kind of deploying all of your resources throughout the process versus the highest leverage areas. And so over time, as you're growing, people start to kind of tap out or be ineffective or not show up or write bad feedback because they just have, not because they don't like the interview, not because they don't want to grow the team. They're just kind of overwhelmed and tired. So selectively using them in the right spot. So you're collectively optimizing the time that we're all spending on recruiting within a firm.
Yeah, that's good advice. You guys both mentioned kind of getting the founder or founders involved. When do you do that? It might vary based on role or level of seniority, but what's your advice on kind of when to do that and how early in the process?
Yeah, I think Adam made a really good point about using them on both ends of the process. So at the very beginning and at the end. So we'll sometimes ask our founders, we thankfully have 4 founders, which makes it a little bit less of a burden on each one of them, but we'll ask them to get involved. Sometimes sending outreach to candidates from them, if they approve of that, or even hopping on a first call with the candidate before they even enter the recruitment process to tell them more about their vision for the company, their vision for the role, things like that. Another thing that we just started doing, if a recruiter reaches out to a candidate and we see that they're viewing an email through our outreach system, but they aren't responding to it, maybe they've viewed 7 times, something like that, we'll sometimes have a founder reach out then and say, hey, I know this recruiter reached out to you. Would you be open to hopping on a call with me and learning more? And then to Adam's other point, at the other end of the process for a close, we try to get our founders involved in sending notes, meeting for coffee or drinks or a meal with candidates if they're in the same geographic area, and even just offering to hop on a Zoom and walk them through any questions they have. Anything to add, Adam?
Yeah, I think, you mentioned candidate experience earlier on, and probably between like Facebook and Pinterest and the companies we're with now, we've probably seen like hundreds of thousands of candidate surveys. And the thing that's always true is that what matters most, what correlates highest to an acceptance rate in a candidate feedback survey, is that they felt that the company wanted them. That is a personal experience for them. Again, strategic advantage you all have over larger companies is you can be higher touch and more personal than the bigger companies. And so using that to your advantage. It's not, I'd love to say it's the recruiter, or I'd love to say it's the hiring manager, but it's actually the hiring manager who helps deliver that candidate experience by creating that almost that selling and assessing and selling at the same time throughout the process versus turning it on at the close. And so if you feel like you're tailoring the experience to their background and skills, they feel like that company really wants me, you're much more likely to get that person. The close becomes more running through the finish line than turning on the love at the very end. And so companies that kind of keep a measured experience throughout tend to be more effective in winning the candidate.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think as we've all said multiple times, it's really not our market, it's the candidate's market. And so I think, one way is to deliver that personal candidate experience. And then you've also both mentioned selling along the way, not just at the end. And so what are there specific things that you recommend doing or things that you've really seen make a big difference? What does selling mean to you guys, and what are the best ways to do it? Whoever wants to start with this one.
I can jump in. One thing I've seen work well is in terms of selling and to Adam's point, making candidates feel like they're really wanted at the company, is setting up almost a buddy system where there's an interviewer who maybe advocated for the candidate after a first round interview, and having that person reach out to the candidate, after every round or before every round and just say, hey, I'm rooting for you, like, great job, super excited, and then have that kind of transition to a buddy when they join. So that's one strategy I've seen be effective.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of magic to recruiting, but one piece of it is, and it's really interesting, is when you talk to a candidate at the beginning, when they're just starting a conversation with the company, you can ask them what they care about, what they're motivated by, like why would they leave their current, they kind of give you these really interesting nuggets of information that then you can sprinkle throughout the process and making sure you're hitting those motivators or those things that matter most to them. So for example, one candidate might really care about making impact. Another might work on really tough technical challenges. Another one might work really passionate about the product space that you're in, or the colleagues, or what it could be a number of different things, but kind of sussing those out up front and making sure different people are hitting those points across the board. The magic of recruiting is when a candidate hears a relatively consistent message against the things that they're motivated by and matter to them. And they're like, hey, this feels natural to me. This isn't a leap of faith. And we all are thinking about the amount of risk that a candidate has to think about when joining an early stage or growth stage company. That gets mitigated heavily when you're meeting them where they are in terms of what matters most to them. And so pulling that out front, making sure that your interview team and people that will be about the process are kind of touching upon that in their own authentic but personal way, but consistent enough that it feels like it's a consistent story that they're hearing.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's really good advice. Maybe just to go kind of on the complete opposite here, what are some things that you should not do? Is there, other than beside the obvious, or maybe nothing's obvious anymore. What is really bad for candidate experience? Let's just go there quickly. Ruby.
What is really bad for candidate experience? I think really bad would be not updating them throughout the process, like not setting them up for success, not telling them who they're meeting with or why, making it feel like we're evaluating them without giving them a chance to ask questions, and really making it feel one-sided. I know I felt that way in interview processes before, and it's something that our team really tries to avoid, and rather kind of pivot it and think, what's in it for them? Why are they here? They've shown up to this call, like what's in it for them? How can I evaluate them and also help them evaluate us?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think some things that we see a lot are where companies are using, work samples, whether it's a working session, a take-home test, and it's inappropriate in terms of like where it's entered into the process or how much time you're asking them to spend up front. So we generally think, as a sliding scale, the further you go along into the interview process, the more fair it is to ask of people's time to spend to do things. So we had one company who was asking for like a 3-hour take-home piece of work at like the front end of the process. Like, that's not going to work for you. Not only is it a bad candidate experience, they're probably not going, they're going to drop out of the process.
They're going to do it.
So like that happens a lot. I think the other thing is when people feel like their time was wasted as a candidate, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a front-end engineer that's getting infrastructure, back-end questions. It's a PR candidate who gets a marketing case study. These things are like that's not my background, it's not my interest, and like did they look at my profile type of thing. So like things like that where it feels like the experience isn't really tailored to the background, or the work that are being asked to do or the questions that are being asked aren't relevant to what the role was they thought they were interviewing for.
Yeah. Okay.
I have one.
Yeah, go.
Sorry, I was just going to say one more nugget to add, which I think is one of the worst things companies can do, which is just not getting back to candidates. I've heard so many times from friends and folks I've worked with that they've applied for jobs and they just haven't heard anything back, or they've interviewed for jobs and haven't heard anything back. I think, if you apply and you have kind of we'll reach out if there's interest, I think that's fine. But if somebody does an interview with somebody on your team, you should send them a note no matter what. And it should be personalized enough to at least, have the company name in it, have your name at the end, and be a nice note. You never know. They might know someone who's interviewing, they might know someone who could be a good fit for you. And you want to keep that experience strong and make everyone want to work at your company, even if you ultimately don't decide it's the right fit for the company.
Yeah, totally. Because that person then goes off and tells everyone about that experience, right? And so it's really, it doesn't just stop with the candidate.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Ruby mentioned kind of when you're a candidate, just keeping them updated. Even a no update is really important, right? So we've all been candidates before, and the hardest about being a candidate is just the purgatory of not knowing where you're at. Like, it's like, it's the lack of information that's the hardest piece. So even if you're reaching out to them, like, hey, just wanted to let you know, we're still working through the process, or still gathering feedback, or whatever it is, just so they know that you haven't lost track of them and you're still thinking they're still top of mind. You get points just for making connection, even if you're not moving them forward, with positive or negative news.
Yep. Okay, that's good. One last just thing to tie up the kind of speed and quality. When we say speed, what speed are you seeing people move at? Like, are roles getting closed in the week, 2 weeks? Like, are good candidates moving that quickly? Like, what's good, or where do you guys try? Obviously, you try to do fast as possible, but like, any kind of rough guidelines there?
I'm gonna let Adam go first,
Yeah.
because he has a Hawkside View on the market.
Yeah, I mean, you can go too fast, right? And we've seen the counter example where the company moves too fast, and they've had one conversation, and they want to go to an offer, and they're like, whoa, like, does this company even have a talent bar? Like, are they going to hire anyone?
Yeah.
Like, so people, like, there's a right level of give and take there. I think where we see it go really fast is when that candidate has worked directly with a hiring manager or someone else closely on the team, where there's a lot of confidence already going in, and there's a couple conversations need to happen. So I think twice last week I had candidates who withdrew, and they were like, I didn't know it was going to go that fast. Kind of out of the blue, I got an offer, but because they had a direct relationship with the hiring manager or someone else that they really trusted, they like closed those gaps. And so I think on average you have, on the fastest, 2 to 3 weeks. On the upper end, the more senior could go 6 to 7 weeks, but it really just varies on like the level of comfort and relationships they might already have in that company.
Okay, Ruby, anything else on that topic, or moving on?
Yeah, we're seeing speed. I don't have a stat to share. Like, it's hard to know the exact speed difference from, say, 6 months ago to right now. And that would definitely need to break down by role, but we're seeing things move a lot faster than they were. And a candidate say, like, where we notice it the most is, on a first call, they say, what's your timeline like? Where are you in the process? And a candidate will say, oh, I just started looking. It's my first week of calls. And then the next week they have an offer in hand, and, they're wondering when you're going to get to the end of the process. So I feel like for especially entry-level roles, it's maybe a couple of weeks. For more senior roles, maybe more like 4 weeks. For executives, certainly a bit longer than that, but we're seeing turnarounds that may be more like double what we were seeing 6-9 months ago.
Yeah. And how long do you think a candidate will wait for you? Let's say they really like you, but they already have an offer in hand. How quickly do you need to move then?
It probably depends on the specific situation, but I would say maybe 3-4 days. Not a long time, because if, think about it from a candidate's perspective. Let's say that you were interviewing at 2 companies you were excited about. You got an offer from one, let's say you have 4 business days to decide, maybe. If you don't get an offer from the other one, are you going to just wait around and hope, or are you going to go for the offer you have? Like, I think that's kind of the situation we're seeing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything to add there, Adam.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right. Another thing, I feel like second biggest topic, and also something moving very fast, is just comp data. How do you handle kind of real-time comp data? How are you, setting expectations around comp data and actually communicating with candidates? How do you guys think about compensation, I guess, more broadly?
Yeah, we use a system for benchmarking that's called PAVE. And what they do is integrate directly with HR systems to aggregate data on comp in real time and then share that back with their customers. We're actually on a free version of it. So if anyone's looking for a comp tool, we're super happy with the free version of PAVE. But that is really helpful for us to just make sure that when we're getting an offer ready, we're sanity checking, where the market is at in real time. The second thing we do is crowdsource comp expectations from candidates to understand what they're seeing in the market and make sure we're reflecting that. So if maybe a benchmarking system is back in time a couple of months, and candidates are seeing 20% higher in the market, we can start thinking through that and reflect that where we need to. And then, we would typically a combination of those two things. What about you, Adam?
Yeah, what are you advising people, Adam?
Yeah, I think what we've seen is the shelf life of comp data has gone from 6 months to 6 weeks in short. And so if you're using comp data that's more than 6 weeks old, that's how fast the market is moving. Whoever is talking to candidates, they have the live market. What that candidate expects to get for your job in your company, that's the market, right? And so, are you going to get 100 data points to give you confidence of like a medium, mid, and that? Like, nope. Like you have to respond to the market, balance against your comp principles, right? And so we obviously can't, as companies, run just being reactive to what every candidate wants versus like what are our compensation philosophies and principles? What are the highest priority roles? Objectively, what roles are we willing to go out of band for because they have bigger impact than others? What really frustrates CFOs and founders is when we become reactionary to the anecdotal story of one candidate, and now we feel like we're just chasing things. So objectively thinking about what are your P0 roles where you're willing to go out of band, and doing that divorced from a candidate that we fall in love with will help you feel more confident as a leader on where we're gonna break bands and where we're gonna stay within bands and principle, balance against how we the market data we have. And so the tactics and tools that Ruby mentioned, I think, are excellent ways to give you that counterbalance of, are we still in market anymore?
Yeah. And I guess too, you kind of react, right? If you're not getting any candidates, like how do you deal with the situation where you're really not seeing any candidates you want, kind of with the, expectations that you had set or you're within your guidelines?
Yeah. So I have the recruiters on my team come to me if they see a couple of candidates who are asking for compensation for a role that is not within our band for that role. And then we go back to PAVE and we go back to a couple of other sources we can tap into, like Option Impact, which can be a little outdated, but we try to then kind of look at a few different sources and look at what candidates are asking for, and sanity check if we're in the right place or if we're below. And multiple times this quarter, we've had that conversation, and we've gotten back to ranges and ended up increasing them to reflect what we were seeing.
Okay, great. Looks like we got a couple comments in the chat here about compensation. So Aaron from Workstream, are there any best practices when presenting OT salary data with a candidate? Quick response from either of you.
We do a visual offer letter, which we then share as a PDF, but we screen share, and it has what our equity is valued at, or what the amount of equity we're offering them is valued at today and how we see it growing over time. And then we do a total comp on the other side that includes the cost of benefits to us. So kind of how much they're getting in benefits, base salary, any bonus or commission, and the equity per year. So they can see, I'm not just making $100,000 on base in a year. It's more like $200,000 total comp when you think about all these other things Tonic's offering.
Yeah, and I think one thing we found from when I was early on at Facebook and early on at Pinterest is if we gave the candidate the option to pick the outcomes and multiples on the equity, they would actually choose a much more aggressive one that even our legal team was comfortable with us communicating as a company, right? So we're like, hey, we would show you like, here's a 2, 5, 7, 10x multiple. And if legal would be like, do not commit to anything more than a 2x, the candidates will pick 10 anyway. So like give that, they're going to bet on themselves and they almost, it's like psychologically they want it to be a 10x. So they're going to choose the higher end scenario. So allow them to choose their level of like belief in the company, because it's actually going to be probably stronger than anyone is, internally would be comfortable with committing to. So that was kind of a fascinating thing. And then Ruby's right. I take credit for all the things that you're providing them in a total comp, delineate it between cash and bonus and equity and things like that. But the cost of benefits and the other things, you should make sure you note those for them so they're thinking about it holistically. And we are having them think about total compensation in terms of both the intrinsic and extrinsic things they might get as an employee.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Quickly, Adam, what comp survey data do you use? Anything new you would share?
I mean, we just run our own comp surveys
Yeah.
every month. We run one because we work on recruiting. We hire like recruiting leaders is like the one role we do search for. So we just run it every month in the market. And obviously we're talking with candidates and gathering that all the time. So we've seen for recruiting leaders, if it's interesting, we've seen a 30% increase over the last 6 months in just recruiter compensation, including recruiting leadership compensation. And head of recruiting is now basically comp the same as head of people in companies as well. So we've seen that kind of like similar leveling of comp, even though the head of recruiting might report into a head of people, they're almost similar comp.
Okay. Yes, a lot of demand. Oh, and people in recruiting right now. Okay, Jamie, good question here. Just a little bit, I guess, to paraphrase, how do you guys think about transparency around salary ranges and providing that before a candidate actually provides their range? Kind of what should come first? How do you manage that?
Yeah, so a couple of things there. One, we typically in a first call will ask a candidate what their salary expectations are. You legally cannot ask what they're currently making, nor is it necessarily an ethical question to ask. But we do ask what their expectations are. And if they flip it to us and say, what's the range for this role, we're happy to share that. What we say candidly is, I can't promise you you'll be at the top end of this range, but like, this is the range that we're looking at for this role, including the range of experience we're looking at. And just another thing I'll mention there, effective May 1st, I believe, if you're hiring at all in New York State, you'll need to include your salary ranges on all external job postings. And I believe that's something that more states will be rolling out soon. So it might be something good to start thinking about and start kind of embedding into job postings. And it's certainly on the radar for us.
Okay. Okay, great. That's super helpful. Thank you guys. One other question we had around compensation, and we touched on this a little bit, but maybe just to answer it a little bit more. Have you seen any change in balance between candidates' expectation around equity comp versus cash? Are people wanting one or more, as people, I think, start to understand equity more and the potential for it? Just curious if you guys have seen any shifts over time and then what you're seeing right now.
I haven't seen a lot. I do think education around options, early exercise, options extension, RSUs, there was a lot of misunderstanding or lack of clarity on that. So I think we see more candidates asking the questions behind the value of the equity. What's it pegged to? Is it pegged to the fair market value 49A? What's the spread? So I think there's like broader awareness of equity and options in valuations and over valuations that we're seeing now with companies too. So we see some candidates like thinking about even discounting what they're hearing from a valuation of a company and what it's being pegged to and things like that. So I think that's generally just good for candidates and good for the thing. But I still think it's a little bit case by case on where they're at and what they need cash wise. I think there's like a tinge of like more security with people wanting some cash, but if they're in a better cash position, then they can take more of the risk. So I think it still varies a lot by the person. But I'm interested to hear what Ruby has to say.
I was going to say, I think it also varies a lot by the person. And especially given the last couple of years, I think, there are people who have had great exits with companies. And I tend to see the candidates who have worked at companies that have IPO'd or, their cash or their equity has been worth something. Those are the ones who really are looking for an equity heavy offer. But I think there are a number of candidates out there who are prioritizing cash over equity now. And that it's really, I've seen it be a case by case basis. The only thing I'll note though there is that I've noticed that across all roles, candidates are looking for more cash, whereas that may be more even on equity to where it was 6 months ago. Adam, I don't know if you feel that way, but it seems like cash is up across all roles.
Yeah, I feel like the days where you have to take a cash cut to take the equity upside is like the equity upside is still there, but cash is just coming up to be, you know what I mean? Like it's just like more of everything. I'd say that's what we've seen. I also see Kendall's hand up too. Tiffany, I just want to make sure. because I don't think he dropped a question in, but he politely raised his hand.
Oh, perfect. Let's see. Bailey can probably orchestrate getting Kendall to ask a question.
It's almost too polite because no one can see you.
Hi, Kendall. Sorry.
No problem. Yeah, I was added something else to what Jamie asked about the range and being scared to share the range. What we did in my last company is once we figured things out enough, we clearly delineated like what does it take to be at the top of the range, knowing that there's going to be candidates out there that all think that they're at the top of the range. And so we came up with a pretty compelling set of questions. Like, okay, so like question A, question B, and when you get good at asking those questions, and most candidates will self-select themselves out of that top range. Like they will say, okay, I'm not there yet. But the nice thing is you can say, and we really support you in getting to that level over the next 5 years. We provide, and then they know that there's hope to get to that range and that we'll support them getting there and that there's upside over the coming years. But being able to like defend and not defend, but explain what the top of that range is really helped us.
Yeah, thank you, Kendall. That's super helpful. And actually, one thing you brought up that I think is a good point as well is just actually showing growth, within the role, within the organization, and talking candidates through that. Maybe Adam and Ruby, if you have any comments on Kendall's question, and then also just how do you talk to candidates about potential upside other than just obviously company is going to do well? How do you talk about candidate growth within the org?
Yeah, I mean, I think you want to ground it in fundamentals. And, one of the, I think, best closing strategies is being able to point to objective, non-controversial things. So, if you believe, or the total addressable market is this, and if you believe we do this, then the kind of draw them through. The other thing is to point them to companies that have already been through the stage that you're about to enter and see like the uptick or slope they had. So if you believe that you're joining my company who's at this stage, and if you look at the similar company who's had an exit was at this stage, look what they did over the period of time. So you kind of point to these like objective things that already happened, or things you might have around monthly active users or AAR, things like that. And then you help them to kind of cross the chasm that if you believe that we can expand the market by this percentage, then you can see how that kind of changes. And like you kind of lead them down the path, but you ground it in things that are generally understood and accepted in the market, whether it's your data or companies who've been at like one generation ahead of you.
Same way to pitch VCs, right? I'm like, this sounds familiar. Okay, yeah, go ahead, Ruby.
Seriously. I was just going to say another thing that we do. We had a pretty blockbuster 2021, and we have a few key stats that we try to get out there in first calls around revenue growth, raising around increase in ARR, increase in customer numbers, things like that we try to kind of embed in a first conversation so that they understand kind of how we've grown even in the last year and where we see that growth going. And it feels more backed up in stats about things that have happened and not just what we're hoping happens in the future.
Yep. Yeah, both are important. Okay. And one other thing I want to touch on that we talked about, just attracting candidates. Obviously, you're finding candidates, you're reaching out, but also want candidates to kind of have a good view of the company. And so company brand is super important. How are you guys conveying company brand? How do you think about that from a recruiting standpoint? Anything specific that you're doing that would be helpful to share?
Yeah, one of our biggest assets is our employees. If they're enjoying their time at Tonic, we encourage them to share that out more broadly. We recently had 2 networking sessions put on by the people and talent team where we taught others at the company how to source candidates in their network and apply them to our company referral program, but also how to share out on LinkedIn and other platforms about the great work we're doing as a company, the roles we're hiring for, things like that. And we've seen a really big uptick in folks coming in since those sessions. So I would say don't underestimate the power of your employees and your engineers to sell other engineers. And then in terms of more traditional branding, we have a strong presence on Glassdoor, LinkedIn, and Build-In. Build-In is, I believe, the only one we're paying for, but we found that annual contract to be worthwhile in terms of getting the name out there. And just to answer these questions on referral bonus, we currently have 2 referral bonuses, one for all roles, and then kind of an additional one for high priority roles. So for non-high priority roles, it's 5,000 per hire after 90 successful days of the referral being at the company. And for high priority roles, it's 10,000, which is still less than we would pay an agency. And we are happy to pay that to our staff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's such a good, I mean, it's probably a very big area where you're getting great candidates in, right? People who already know them, and then, they can also help sell. So good. Adam, anything you would add on brand?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting exercise to pretend that you're a senior specialized, say, machine learning or head of PR, and you get a random outreach from a founder at a company. What's the first thing you're going to do? It's not reply. You're going to go do your back channeling on the company and the people, right? So you're going to probably back channel that candidate later, and you better believe that they're back channeling you now before they actually reply to that email. So where are they going to look, right? So if you're an engineer, you might go to, you might look at like commits that the people are doing on GitHub or Stack Overflow. You might look to see the strength of the engineering team. You might see if they have an Eng blog. You might go read. You're going to do all this research before dipping your, it's a big decision to reply back, because if you're replying back, you're committing 10 hours of your future life to go like talk to that company. So you're going to do certainly 30 minutes of research. So go through that exercise of where people would go look, and then what is your brand out there on AngelList, on Crunchbase? Are they seeing a consistent set of information that is true and relevant to them? So that's an interesting exercise to do. 100% what Ruby said, agree with what Ruby said, of leveraging your employees, and a lot of low-hanging, relatively free things you can do to make sure their LinkedIn profiles are updated and consistent with titles, and that we're hiring and pushing out information on LinkedIn. But are your employees comfortable with talking about why they joined your company originally and why they're still there, and one exciting project or person they work with? And just like that Mad Libs exercise of helping your employees go through that exercise. So when we're going to cocktail parties and barbecues again, when they're asked about where you work, they have like, do they kind of stand up shoulder straight and excited and have something clear and crisp and concise to say? Or is it kind of they mumble through that? So giving them the time to actually think through their little mini pitch on the company and why they're there is really important as well.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. On referrals, one quick thing on referrals, it's kind of a red line. Once you extend a referral program for cash, really hard to pull that back.
Yeah.
So one of the things I love that Ruby talked about is high priority roles. If you want to baby step into referrals and paid referrals in your company, if you're not sure, one thing is you could run as a trial. So you could run it for a period of time, because then always gives you kind of the opportunity to pull it back because it was a fixed period of time. Or two, you said it's like, hey, we're going to have referrals for always our highest priority roles. And then you get to decide, at any given time, maybe priority roles are all of our open roles, or maybe it's just product and design, or maybe it's just sales. You can kind of rotate things through where it keeps focus and energy around a smaller number of roles without feeling like Wild West, and the CFO is like stressed every day of how much money people are spending their time sourcing out of LinkedIn and not, shipping product. That can be a couple baby steps into trialing it to see if it's right. But once you go, it's really hard to pull that back away. It feels like a takeaway for employees if you kind of pull back on a paid referral program.
Yeah. Okay. That's super helpful. Also, I think Swami had a question earlier that I just wanted to make sure we touched on, and then we'll move on to another topic. So Swami, sometimes best candidates are not actively in the market. And so what strategies have you guys seen work best for nudging cold candidates?
I think that's a great opportunity to get those founders involved or senior leaders within the specific org that you're hiring for, and have them reach out directly, offer to grab coffee. I think it's a great time, especially if it's a technical candidate and you're really pumped about the product you're building, to offer to do a product demo, and walk through what you're building and why it's so technically cool and the challenges are so interesting. And so I think things like that make a big difference. But I'd say really kind of getting into sell mode and getting them excited about the opportunity by tapping on senior leaders internally, and trying to understand, to Adam's point, what they're excited about, what makes them tick. Like, if there is one thing they aren't getting in their job and they would make a move for that, what is that thing? And hopping on and trying to sell them on that and get them pumped to interview.
Who's gotten an email before? It's like, I'm this founder, I have this product, and I have this job. That is all about you as the founder. And really, if you spin it around and make it around the candidate, it's like, hey, I saw you did this thing. I was impressed by this thing. We have this shared experience of both dropping out of our PhD program. When you make it about them and you put the candidate at the center and you take the extra step to do a little research about that person, what makes them unique and why they could be a great fit, it changes the engagement and activation levels incredibly. We all right now, if we spent 2 minutes and went and found 10 Android engineers at Twitter, we could all do it. Discovery is not the challenge. Engagement and activation is the challenge. And the companies that activate the best put the candidate at the center and spend the extra 2 minutes to make it personalized. Because that 2 minutes means that's 20 less messages you need to send because that person responded back to you. But instead, most companies have this funnel of doom where I'm going to reach out to 150, knowing 10 are going to respond, 2 are going to be, but you just burn through 130 other people trying to get to those 2. So spend the extra minute just to get to the 2, and it's going to be a better return for you over time. And by the way, that better candidate experience that we think that runs throughout the process starts with how you engage and how you make it like that you really care about them and how they could be a fit for them based on who they are as a person.
Yeah. And I think, Adam, you said this before, but like actually slowing down at the beginning can help you go faster. And so, getting really clear on the role and then, spending time doing that extra few minutes of personalization at the beginning, can actually kind of end up helping with the results along the way. So, okay, great. Okay, one other question from Hannah. Any parts of the standard recruiting process that you feel can be automated a bit other than scheduling? For example, setting strategic questions in the application for screening purposes. How do you balance that with good candidate experience? Ruby, any thoughts?
I'm thinking. I think having a really clear process, to Adam's point, is really helpful, and being kind of strong in your convictions after a first call or an application. It's okay to let someone go if they don't meet those that set of criteria. I don't think you can just automate the whole recruiting process. I think you can work with fabulous external partners like Adam to fill your hiring needs. So maybe use the golden ticket, but even in that case where you're working with external partners, you still need to put in the work. And especially now, you have to kind of treat candidates like royalty and really make them feel special. So scheduling, yes, I think there's definitely some automation that can happen there. You can tighten up the process. You need to put less time into interviewing. But I don't think you can automate the whole thing.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know, Adam, if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, can I say no?
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
good.
think there's other things you automate. I would optimize the process versus trying to automate parts of it.
Okay. I can't believe we only have 10 minutes left. One other super, super important topic. We've spent now 50 minutes talking about how to attract and hire. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about retention, because obviously that's also super important in terms of building a great team. I think especially in today's environment as well. What are you guys doing? I guess maybe Adam, we'll start with you. What are you seeing companies do to attract great talent, outside of compensation? And then Ruby, if you want to give us any tips from how you guys are thinking about retention at Tonic.
Yeah, I think we see companies just re-recruiting their current employees and emphasizing their growth and development. Sometimes in a high growth environment, it feels like if you're an internal employee, that the company cares more about who they're bringing in versus the people who already took the risk and made the big decision to join. And so think about like, what would you do to attract someone to your company? Well, are you applying those same principles to what you do to retain them, right? So things that like tactically, what that looks like is really clear growth opportunities and development for them, in putting people in stretch opportunities. If we all think back in our careers where we learned the most, someone probably put us in a position, or we got put into a position where we were a little bit over our skis, right? We were like a little bit like good mix of scared, excited, nervous. And like at the time it was terrifying, and the time you knew it, you had no idea, you didn't belong there, but you learned the most. And actually you probably look back most fondly on that window. And we tend to do that more for candidates than we do for our own employees. So think about where you can put your employees in stretch opportunities, give them the opportunity to prove that they can do it, and put them a little bit over their skis. Ways that you can kind of identify those things are like, we're big fans of stay interviews. So particularly around milestones for people, whether it's they're there 6 months, they're a year, sitting down with them and ask like how they're doing, what do they want to do more of, what are they doing less of, are they enjoying the company? Like doing these stay interviews are really important because it acknowledges milestones they hit, and you get to thank them for their time and service there. But you also get these little nuggets of things that are really helpful that for you as a manager, you can grow and develop and find out what's really key for them that might continue to retain them, because that might have shifted since they joined a year ago or 6 months ago, or since they're in a new role. So gleaning that out and taking the time to do a stay interview, we think is a great way to ascertain that info.
Okay, awesome. And Ruby, how do you think about it at Tonic? Any special things you're doing?
Yeah, I love that concept of a stay interview, and I think it'd be great if we rolled that out. So thanks for sharing, Adam. I think in addition to thinking about performance and growth opportunities, it's been a wild couple of years, and I think really thinking about what makes people thrive at work and what gives them the most kind of flexibility and kind of ability to succeed is really important, especially right now. So a lot of that for us is on the benefit side. We're remote first across the continental US. We keep hearing, loud and clear from both our internal staff and our candidates that that's really important to them. But we also do things like offer co-working stipends and ways for people to get together in person if those are things they feel comfortable with and they want. We focus on things like strong healthcare and unlimited PTO. We encourage our managers to encourage their reports to take PTO. We have budgets for the whole company and for managers to do nice things for employees. Recognize milestones, recognize if they've had a death in the family or had a baby or something like that, where they might appreciate receiving something in the mail. They're all really little things, but we put a lot of time into pouring love into Tonic's culture, and listening to what makes our employees happy at work and feel supported outside of work. And we have, knock on wood, had zero voluntary attrition to date, although we know that at some point somebody will leave for another great opportunity, and hopefully will be a positive blip on the way for them.
Well, that's incredible, Ruby. So obviously you were doing something right. Sounds like a lot of things. So that's awesome. You touched on, culture and kind of in a remote first environment. How are you, we talked a little bit about candidate experience, but how do you guys think about, kind of actively, nurturing culture throughout the team on a kind of regular basis when everyone's distributed?
Yeah, I think it's definitely harder. We do lean on finding ways for people to connect in person when they can and when they feel comfortable. So that is part of our culture plan. But in terms of kind of staying connected and helping people feel happy remotely, we do things like donut chats through Slack, where people are randomly set up for coffee with a coworker once a week. We have a bunch of interest groups on Slack, which was so easy to set up, but people love them. So different teammates creating interest groups for fantasy football or pets or books, things like that, video games, and finding a few minutes in the day to talk about that. Trying to think of other kind of quick tidbits. But we also find ways for the whole team to connect and offer kind of events for people. So trying to keep that social element up, which is obviously harder remotely, but trying to mix that in with work, and also having full company stand-ups where we talk through OKRs and answer questions and make sure that people feel on track with the business objectives, in addition to having fun and hopefully, making a best friend at work.
Yeah, that makes sense. And are you guys doing anything, like, what's the discussion around burnout? Are you guys doing anything to, kind of keep an eye on that, or, are employees ever raising their hands? Like, how do you create a safe space for that?
Yeah, we try to make sure that managers are having one-on-ones with their staff once a week, and that one of those conversation topics is actually around how they're doing, and giving them a space to share. I feel burnout. Like I need some time, and also sharing that we do have an unlimited PTO policy and we want people to take that. I see one of my reports is on here right now, and he can probably be the first to vouch for, every week in our one-on-one, I say, like, when are you going to take a vacation? Like, what's your plan for PTO? I'm going on this trip. What are you doing? And I think kind of being transparent about what you're doing for yourself, and encouraging them to take time as well. And whether it's also working different hours or trying to get creative around how to support people to do their best work is, I think, really important.
Yeah, no, I love that. People first. So, Adam, anything else? We're got a few more minutes.
I think company-wide breaks are good too. So a lot of our clients are doing like one Friday a month, the company closes, or taking longer holiday weekends on things. It's really hard for some people. It's really hard to be the one person off, because you feel like you get behind, particularly now with how pervasive Slack is and everyone's working more. So when it feels like everyone is taking a break, it's easier for some people to also take a break. We've seen some of our more forward-thinking clients having more holidays, more times off or early shutdowns and things like that, that are helping people who wouldn't normally take a break, who are probably most susceptible to burnout, makes it easier for them to take a break.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, Ruby and Adam, thank you guys so much. This was really awesome, a great conversation. So many good, actionable tidbits coming out of it. And so, I believe we'll be sharing some of that with the community here. Thank you also to everyone who joined. Really great questions. Appreciate all the engagement. And really, really thank you. So thanks so much to everyone.
Thanks, Alex.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.